Dolly Parton, the country music icon who broke every barrier known in the music industry, has passed away at the age of 80.
For nearly a year, Dolly Parton's public health story seemed to be about ordinary problems that come with getting older. There were kidney stones, dizziness, dehydration, exhaustion, and the emotional weight of losing her husband, Carl Dean. Then, on August 25, 2026, Parton died in Nashville at the age of 80. Her death was announced by her family, and the first reports did not immediately explain what had happened. Soon afterward, representatives confirmed that she had been battling cancer and described it as a brief battle. The revelation changed the way people looked back at almost every health update she had given during the previous year. What makes the story so difficult to process is that Dolly had not exactly been silent. She had spoken openly about feeling unwell. She had explained why she was stepping back from some commitments. She had even talked about specific physical problems. What she had not done was connect those individual pieces into one complete medical explanation. And that distinction is important, because it means the story is not simply about a celebrity hiding an illness. It is also about a woman deciding how much of her private life she wanted the public to share. September 2025. The first warning. The timeline reaches back to September 2025, when Parton postponed a planned Las Vegas residency. At the time, she explained that she was dealing with health challenges and that doctors had recommended several procedures. To fans, the announcement sounded concerning, but not necessarily catastrophic. There was no public suggestion that she was facing a terminal illness, and Parton continued to communicate with the same warmth and humor that had defined her public personality for decades. Looking back now, that announcement feels like an important first chapter in a story whose ending nobody could see at the time. The language was careful, but careful does not automatically mean dishonest. A person can genuinely be undergoing medical procedures while still choosing not to reveal every diagnosis behind them. In fact, that may have been the boundary Parton was trying to maintain. She wanted people to understand that she was dealing with health problems, but she did not appear willing to turn those problems into the center of her public identity. That decision became even more significant as the months passed, because her health difficulties continued while she remained determined to preserve some sense of normal life. October, when her family became worried. Then came October 2025, when Parton's younger sister, Freda Parton, publicly asked fans to pray for Dolly because she was not feeling her best. The message understandably worried people. Fans had already heard about the postponed performances and medical procedures, so a family member asking for prayers naturally made the situation feel more serious. Dolly responded soon afterward, attempting to reassure the public and calm some of the growing concern. That moment is especially revealing because it shows the difference between private family worry and public communication. A family member sees the person behind the famous image. Fans see the person Dolly chooses to show them. Neither perspective necessarily has to be false. Freda's concern could be genuine, while Dolly could genuinely believe she was capable of continuing to live and work without making the public part of every medical detail. That is what makes the situation more complicated than a simple story about secrecy. She was not standing in front of the world claiming that nothing was wrong. Instead, she repeatedly acknowledged that something was wrong while keeping the larger diagnosis private, the weight of grief, and the meaning of physically. By March 2026, Dolly was also speaking more openly about exhaustion and grief. Carl Dean, her husband of nearly 6 decades, had died in March 2025, and his loss clearly affected her deeply. At Dollywood, she spoke about trying to rebuild herself spiritually, emotionally, and physically. At the time, those words were easy to understand through the lens of grief. She had lost the person who had been beside her for most of her adult life, and she was trying to find her footing again. But knowing what came later gives the word, physically, a different weight. It is important, however, not to turn hindsight into certainty. We cannot know exactly what Dolly meant when she said those words, or precisely what she understood about her health at that moment. What we can say is that she was acknowledging a physical struggle alongside her emotional one. Her public comments were becoming increasingly honest about the fact that she was not at full strength. even though she still did not reveal the diagnosis that would eventually explain the seriousness of the situation. May 2026, the kidney problems become public. In May 2026, Parton gave fans considerably more information. She discussed kidney stones and described how persistent the problem had become. She also said that her immune and digestive systems had been out of balance for 2 or 3 years, and that she and her doctors were working to strengthen her health. Those comments are significant because they show that her health concerns were not simply something that appeared days before her death. She had publicly described ongoing difficulties that stretched back years. Later reporting also connected her final hospitalization with kidney and autoimmune issues, making those earlier statements even more relevant. But there is a crucial distinction between having long-running health problems and knowing that cancer is responsible for them. Symptoms can have multiple causes, and only medical evaluation can establish the connection. That is why it would be unfair to look backward and assume that every kidney problem or period of exhaustion was automatically evidence of cancer. The more accurate conclusion is simpler. Dolly was experiencing real health difficulties. She knew her body was struggling, and she chose to share some of that information without publicly disclosing the full diagnosis. The final days. In the final weeks of her life, Parton continued to communicate with fans in much the same way. She had to miss some appearances and explained that her doctor had advised her against traveling. She spoke about feeling dizzy and dehydrated, and she continued to express optimism about returning to the things she loved. Just days before her death, she was still discussing her health publicly and reflecting on difficult times with her characteristic resilience. Then came the hospitalization in Nashville. Reports indicate that she was admitted several days before her death, with kidney and autoimmune problems among the issues reported. She ultimately died at a Nashville cancer center, surrounded by loved ones. Her representatives described her illness as a brief battle with cancer, while the specific type of cancer has not been publicly identified. That lack of detail matters. There is still much the public simply does not know, and it would be wrong to fill those gaps with speculation. The most responsible account is the one supported by what her family and representatives have actually confirmed. Why Dolly may have chosen privacy. There is another way to understand the entire timeline, and it has less to do with secrecy and more to do with control. Dolly Parton spent her entire career deciding exactly how much of herself the public would see. She turned her childhood, her family, her appearance, her humor, and her struggles into stories. But that did not mean every part of her private life belonged to everyone else. She was extraordinarily open as an entertainer, while remaining remarkably protective as a person. That instinct was visible throughout her career. She built businesses, controlled her music, created Dollywood, and established charitable projects that reflected her values. She understood how powerful public attention could be, but she also understood how exhausting it could become. A serious cancer diagnosis could have changed every conversation around her. Instead of asking about a new project, people might have asked how much time she had left. Every appearance could have become a medical update. Every photograph could have been analyzed for signs of decline. By keeping the diagnosis private, Dolly may have been trying to protect something very simple: the ability to keep living her life without allowing an illness to become the only story people saw. What her final year really says about Dolly. Dolly Parton's death does not erase the truth of everything she told her fans during her final year. If anything, it makes those statements more meaningful. She told people she was struggling, and she was. She said she was tired, and she was. She talked about grief, physical problems, and the need to rebuild her strength, and all of those things were part of her reality. What she kept private was the larger diagnosis behind them. Whether that decision was wise, understandable, or simply personal is something each person will judge differently. But it should not overshadow the life she spent decades building. Dolly Parton was never only a singer. She was a songwriter, actress, businesswoman, philanthropist, and one of the most recognizable figures in American culture. Her imagination library put books into the hands of millions of children, while her generosity supported medical research and communities in need. Her final months should therefore not be remembered only as a mystery surrounding cancer. They should also be remembered as the last chapter of a life in which she repeatedly chose to give people joy, even when she herself was carrying something difficult. Dolly controlled her story for as long as she could. In the end, she left behind more than a diagnosis. She left behind songs, businesses, memories, opportunities for children, and a legacy that will continue long after the final details of her illness fade from public conversation.